Ava Mitchell adjusted her sunglasses as she stepped out of the black SUV, her heels clicking against the curb of Los Angeles International Airport. The morning sun gleamed against the tinted windows, and for a moment she took in the bustling energy of LAX, the hurried travelers, the rolling suitcases, the hum of endless announcements over the intercom. She wasn't just any passenger today. As the CEO of a rising tech firm, Ava was on her way to New York for a high-stakes business meeting that could take her company to the next level. First-class ticket in hand, she strode through the terminal, effortlessly stylish in a sleek navy pantsuit. But as always, she was prepared for what often came with being a black woman in spaces people didn't expect her to be. Security had been routine, but not without its microaggressions. The officer had examined her ID longer than necessary, his eyes flicking between her face and the document, as if waiting for something not to match. The woman in line behind her, a blonde in designer athleisure, had barely lifted her passport before being waved through. Ava had smiled, thanked the officer, and kept walking. It was nothing new. As she approached Gate 27A, the line for first-class boarding was beginning to form. Ava moved forward with the ease of someone used to being in exclusive spaces. That was until she met the sharp gaze of the head flight attendant. Lauren Carter stood by the gate entrance, her uniform impeccably pressed, a polite but forced smile on her lips. At first glance, she seemed like any other airline professional, efficient, courteous, a little too practiced in customer service pleasantries. But as Ava stepped closer, she noticed the slight narrowing of the woman's eyes, the stiffness in her posture. "Good morning," Ava said smoothly, handing over her boarding pass. Lauren barely acknowledged her, instead scanning the ticket with a tight-lipped expression. "Heading to New York for business?" she asked, her voice polite but edged with something unreadable. "Yes," Ava replied, sensing something was off. Lauren took a moment longer than necessary to examine the pass before handing it back. "Enjoy your flight," she said, though the words sounded anything but genuine. Ava took her seat in 2A near the front of the first-class cabin. Settling in, she pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to her husband, David, letting him know she was about to take off. Across the aisle, another passenger caught her eye. Mark Reynolds, white, late 50s, the kind of man who carried himself as if the world owed him something. His designer suit and Rolex screamed wealth, but his sneer as he glanced in her direction spoke louder than any brand ever could. Ava ignored him. She had dealt with men like Mark before, entitled, dismissive, always assuming their comfort should come at the expense of others. She focused on the business presentation she had saved on her tablet, mentally preparing for the hours ahead. A few minutes later, Lauren returned, moving through the first-class cabin with a tray of pre-flight drinks. She stopped at Mark's seat first. "Mr. Reynolds, can I get you a glass of champagne or a mimosa this morning?" Mark grinned, giving her a wink. "Champagne, of course. You're a mind reader." Lauren chuckled, pouring his drink before turning away. She served every other passenger in first class with the same warm, attentive energy. Then she reached Ava. Ava glanced up. "I'll have a mimosa, please." Lauren hesitated, her fingers tightening on the tray. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're out of mimosas." Ava blinked. "You just poured one." Lauren's expression didn't change. "I must have miscounted. Can I offer you water or juice?" Ava held her gaze for a long second before exhaling lightly. "Water's fine." Lauren moved on without another word. Ava's fingers curled around the armrest, but she didn't react. Not yet. She had flown too many times, been in too many boardrooms, to let a woman like Lauren rattle her. But something told her this wasn't the last of it. The flight boarded quickly, and soon the plane was taxiing down the runway. As the engines roared to life, Ava leaned back in her seat, letting her eyes close for just a moment. She didn't notice Lauren walking past her row, pausing just a beat too long near her seat. She didn't see the way the flight attendant's eyes flicked to the purse at Ava's feet. and she certainly didn't notice when, in one smooth motion, Lauren reached down, slid her fingers inside, and pulled out a single item before slipping it into her uniform pocket. Ava's passport. She didn't know it yet, but she was about to have the worst flight of her life. Ava leaned back in her seat, staring out the small oval window as the plane ascended into the sky. The city below shrank into a maze of highways and buildings, fading beneath a layer of clouds. She exhaled, letting the tension roll off her shoulders. She had spent years navigating spaces where people like her were unwelcome, learning when to pick her battles and when to let things go. But something about that flight attendant, Lauren, gnawed at her. Across the aisle, Mark Reynolds had made himself comfortable, loosening his tie and sipping his champagne like he was at a private lounge. Every now and then she caught him glancing in her direction, his smirk laced with amusement. Ava ignored him. She had better things to focus on. She reached down to retrieve her purse, intending to check her phone before the Wi-Fi kicked in. Her fingers brushed against soft leather, but something was off. She unzipped the bag, moving things around. Her passport was gone. Ava's pulse quickened as she checked again, digging through every compartment. Her boarding pass was still there, her wallet, her keys. But the small navy blue booklet, the one that held proof of her identity, was missing. She straightened in her seat, scanning the area around her. Maybe it had fallen. She leaned forward, running her hand along the floor beneath her feet, checking under her seat and even into the aisle. Nothing. Her stomach tightened. She pressed the call button. A minute later, Ethan, the younger flight attendant, appeared at her side, his polite but uncertain smile barely masking his nerves. "Miss, how can I help you?" "My passport," Ava said. "It's missing." Ethan blinked, his posture stiffening. "Missing? Are you sure? Maybe it's just misplaced in your bag." "I already checked," Ava said firmly. "It was in my purse when I boarded. Now it's not." Ethan hesitated. "Okay, let me check with the crew. Maybe someone turned it in." Ava nodded as Ethan hurried off. Lauren appeared moments later, her arms crossed. "Is there a problem?" Ava met her gaze, searching for any flicker of recognition. "My passport is missing," she said. Lauren arched an eyebrow, her expression neutral. "That's unfortunate. Are you sure you had it when you boarded?" Ava's patience thinned. "Of course I did. I handed it to the agent at the gate." Lauren tapped her manicured nails against the seat in front of her, lips pursed in mock concern. "Well, if you lost it, I'm not sure what we can do mid-flight, but I'll ask around." She turned to leave, but Ava wasn't finished. "I need you to check with the flight crew now," she said, her voice steady. Lauren turned back, her smile thin and forced. "I just said I would." Something in the way she said it made Ava's skin prickle. She had seen that look before, the smug indifference of someone who thought they could get away with something. Ava sat back, gripping the armrest. She had a feeling this was no accident. Minutes passed. Then Ethan returned, looking nervous. "Miss Mitchell, I checked with the crew and—" He hesitated. "Well, something was found." Ava's heart skipped. "Where?" Ethan swallowed. "In the trash bin near the galley." Ava's breath caught in her throat. "The trash?" Lauren reappeared, holding a small booklet between her fingers. The passport. But as she handed it over, Ava's stomach dropped. The cover was crumpled, its edges torn. She flipped it open, and a cold wave of fury swept through her. The identification page, where her photo and details were, was defaced, smeared with what looked like coffee stains and ink blots. The official stamp was barely legible. Lauren exhaled dramatically. "Looks like it's been through a lot." Ava's fingers trembled as she held the ruined document. Her voice was ice. "How did this end up in the trash?" Lauren shrugged. "No idea, but if I had to guess, you must have dropped it, and someone mistakenly threw it away." Ava's vision sharpened. This woman was lying. She stood, her presence commanding, drawing the attention of the nearby passengers. Even Mark Reynolds put down his champagne. "I didn't drop it," Ava said. "This was stolen." Lauren's fake smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "Miss Mitchell, I understand you're upset, but let's not jump to conclusions." Ava turned to Ethan. "Was this reported missing before you found it in the trash?" Ethan hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. He glanced at Lauren, then back at Ava. No, it was just there." Ava's fists clenched. This wasn't just an inconvenience. This was an attack. A flight attendant had deliberately destroyed her passport. Mark Reynolds let out a quiet chuckle from his seat. "You people always find something to complain about, huh?" Ava whipped her head toward him. "Excuse me?" Mark smirked. "I mean, you lost it, it turned up, and now you want to play the victim." Classic A hush fell over the nearby passengers. Some looked away, pretending not to hear. Others watched, waiting for Ava to react. She didn't take the bait. Instead, she turned back to Lauren. "I need to speak with the pilot," Lauren scoffed. "The captain is busy flying the plane." "I don't care," Ava said. "This isn't just a lost item. This is destruction of property, and I want to know why my passport ended up in the trash." Lauren's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, a voice cut through the air. "She's right," came a firm female voice from a few rows back. A woman stood up, tall, mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a crisp suit that suggested she was used to being in charge. "I'm Olivia Carter," she said, pulling a business card from her pocket. "Attorney." Lauren's face twitched. Ava felt a rush of relief. Olivia stepped closer. "This isn't just some lost passport. This is tampering with federal identification, which, last time I checked, is a crime." Lauren's face paled slightly. Olivia turned to Ava. "You want to escalate this?" "I can help." Ava met Olivia's gaze and nodded. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 3. Ava's grip tightened around the ruined passport as she stared down Lauren. The air in the cabin felt heavier, the low hum of the plane's engines barely cutting through the tension. Nearby passengers shifted in their seats, pretending not to listen but stealing glances at the unfolding confrontation. Lauren's face remained composed, but there was a flicker of something else beneath the surface. Annoyance, a hint of nervousness. Olivia Carter, the attorney, didn't miss it either. She tucked her business card back into her blazer pocket and folded her arms. "We need to speak to the captain," Olivia said, her tone unwavering. Lauren gave her a tight-lipped smile, the kind people in power used when they wanted to dismiss you without actually saying no. "As I said," Lauren replied coolly, "the captain is busy. There's no need to disrupt the flight over this. It's an unfortunate situation, but we're handling it." Ava let out a sharp breath. "Handling it? My passport was stolen and destroyed on this plane, and you want me to just let it go?" Lauren's posture stiffened. "There's no proof that it was stolen." Ava's patience was wearing thin. "Then let's check the security footage." The color in Lauren's face faded for just a second before she recovered. "Ma'am, I'm not sure you understand how aviation security works. We don't have live surveillance in the cabin." "That's convenient," Olivia remarked. Ethan, the junior flight attendant, shifted nervously beside Lauren. His eyes darted between the two women, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed hard. "Ethan," Ava said, her voice softer now but no less firm. "Did you see anything?" Lauren's head snapped toward him so fast that he visibly flinched. He hesitated, eyes dropping to the floor. "I didn't see where it came from, but it shouldn't have been in the trash." Lauren shot him a sharp glare. "Thank you, Ethan. That's enough." "No, it's not," Olivia cut in. "He's clearly got something to say." She turned back to Ethan, her voice measured but insistent. "If you know anything, now's the time to speak up." Ethan's jaw tightened and he took a step back. I can't, I'm sorry. Ava felt a surge of disappointment, but she wasn't surprised. People like Ethan were trapped, caught between doing what was right and protecting their own interests. She had seen it too many times before. Mark Reynolds let out an exaggerated sigh from across the aisle. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, swirling his champagne lazily in his glass. "We've got a long flight ahead. Can we just move on from this nonsense?" Ava turned to face him, her voice like steel. "Does this situation inconvenience you, Mr. Reynolds?" Mark smirked. "A little. I paid for a peaceful flight, not a circus act." Ava opened her mouth to respond, but Olivia beat her to it. "Wow," Olivia said, tilting her head. "A black woman gets her passport stolen and destroyed, and you think she's the one making a scene?" Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "I think people like you. People like her," Olivia cut in sharply. "Go ahead. Say what you really mean." Mark hesitated for half a second before flashing a smug grin. "Oh, you know exactly what I mean." Ava clenched her jaw, willing herself to stay composed. Lauren, sensing the shift in tension, decided to take control again. "Okay, enough. Miss Mitchell, we'll make sure this is properly addressed when we land. In the meantime, I suggest you return to your seat and let us do our jobs." Ava narrowed her eyes. "And what exactly is your job, Lauren?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like it's covering up the truth." Lauren's nostrils flared. "Watch yourself." Ava arched an eyebrow. "Or what?" Lauren opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the PA system crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are currently cruising at 35,000 feet. Estimated time to arrival in New York is 4 hours and 30 minutes. We hope you enjoy your flight." As soon as the announcement ended, Ava made a decision. She reached down, grabbed her phone, and turned on the in-flight Wi-Fi. She might not be able to call anyone mid-air, but she could still send a message. Her fingers moved quickly. "David, I need you to be ready when we land. Something serious just happened." A moment later, the 3 dots appeared, then a response. "What's going on? Are you okay? I'll explain when I land, but I need you there. This isn't just about me anymore." She hit send and exhaled, staring at the ruined passport in her lap. Lauren might have thought she had the upper hand, but she had made one fatal mistake. She underestimated the woman she was dealing with, and that mistake was about to cost her everything. The fasten seatbelt sign illuminated as the captain's voice echoed through the cabin, announcing their descent into New York. The hum of the engines shifted, a subtle change in pressure signaling that they were beginning their final approach. Ava remained still, her hands folded neatly in her lap, but inside her pulse was a steady drumbeat of anticipation. She could feel it, Lauren's growing panic, the way the flight attendant kept glancing toward her, the way her movements had lost their usual confidence. The woman knew the walls were closing in. The other passengers sensed the tension too. Whispers floated through first class. Some were still pretending to be engrossed in their books or screens, but their eyes betrayed them, darting toward Ava and Lauren every few minutes. Olivia Carter, the attorney, was watching too. She had been silent for the past hour, but now she leaned in toward Ava, her voice low. "She's nervous," Olivia murmured. "That's a good sign." Ava smirked slightly. "She should be." Lauren walked briskly up the aisle, stopping a few rows ahead of Ava. Her posture was stiff, her expression carefully controlled, but Ava noticed the subtle signs of unease, the way she smoothed her uniform, the way her fingers clenched slightly at her sides. Then Lauren turned and made her way toward Ava. "Miss Mitchell," she said, her voice tight but attempting to sound professional. "I wanted to let you know that upon arrival, airport security will need to have a quick word with you about your damaged passport. Just a routine procedure." Ava tilted her head, feigning curiosity. Routine. Lauren nodded a little too quickly. Yes. Standard protocol. Ava exchanged a glance with Olivia before turning back to Lauren. That's interesting, she said. Because I spoke with my husband, he informed me that TSA, federal authorities, and a few airline executives are waiting at the gate. She paused, letting her words sink in. Oh, and some reporters. Lauren's face lost its color. Reporters, she repeated, her voice slightly higher than before. Ava smiled. Yes. Apparently word spreads fast when a first-class passenger's passport mysteriously disappears and turns up destroyed in the trash. She leaned in just a little. I imagine your employer will be very interested in hearing how that happened. For the first time, Lauren looked genuinely rattled. She took a step back, clearing her throat. Well, I'm sure this will all be resolved once we land. Ava didn't blink. Oh, it will. Lauren turned abruptly, nearly colliding with Ethan as she stalked toward the galley. Ethan hesitated before glancing down at Ava. His hands were gripping the drink tray tighter than necessary, and his voice was quiet when he spoke. I didn't know she was going to do that, he said. The passport. I swear Ava studied him. He looked young, maybe mid-20s, caught between fear and the pull of his own conscience. Then do the right thing, she said simply. Ethan hesitated before nodding, then quickly walked away. The plane continued its descent, and Ava sat back, feeling the weight of the moment settling in. Soon they would be on the ground, and then everything would come to light. Across the aisle, Mark Reynolds let out an exaggerated sigh, stretching like he had just awoken from a long nap. He smirked at Ava. You really made a show of this, huh? He mused. Ava turned her head slowly. You should be more worried about your own reputation, Mark. People tend to remember those who defend injustice. Mark chuckled, completely unfazed. You act like anyone outside this plane is going to care about your little tantrum. Ava smiled, slow and knowing. Oh, you'll find out soon enough. Mark rolled his eyes, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in them now. The wheels touched the runway with a firm jolt, and the plane sped down the tarmac before gradually slowing. The passengers in economy clapped, one of those traditions that seem to persist on long-haul flights. But in first class, no one was celebrating. Lauren hadn't reappeared since Ava last spoke to her. Olivia adjusted her blazer, looking energized. Ethan was nowhere to be seen. And Ava? Ava was ready. The aircraft taxied toward the gate. She could see it now through the window, the blinking lights of airport vehicles, the jet bridge moving into position. But more importantly, she saw them. David. Standing just outside the terminal doors in his crisp government-issued suit, flanked by uniformed TSA officers and a cluster of well-dressed individuals Ava could only assume were airline executives. And just a few feet away, a row of cameras. Lauren was about to learn a very painful lesson. The plane came to a full stop, and the seatbelt sign flicked off. The overhead bins clicked open, and passengers began standing, stretching, reaching for their luggage. Ava stayed seated, calm and composed. Then, over the intercom, the captain's voice rang out. Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that all passengers remain in their seats for a few extra moments while we handle a security matter upon arrival. Murmurs spread through the cabin. Passengers exchanged confused glances, wondering what was going on. Ava slowly turned her head and met Lauren's gaze as the flight attendant appeared once more, her face now drained of all confidence. Ava lifted her chin slightly. Game over. The murmurs among the passengers grew louder as the reality of the situation settled in. People who had been content to eavesdrop quietly now fully turned in their seats, eyes darting between Ava and the flight attendants. The energy in first class was shifting. Everyone could feel it. Lauren stood stiffly near the galley, her fingers gripping the edge of the drink cart like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Her jaw was set, but her eyes betrayed her, darting toward the front of the plane where uniformed TSA officers were now stepping onto the jet bridge. Ava stayed seated, calm, watching. She knew this moment was going to define what happened next, and she wasn't about to let Lauren take control of the narrative. The first officer on board was a tall black man in his mid-40s with a serious but measured expression. His uniform was crisp, his badge gleaming under the overhead lights. He took in the cabin with a sweeping glance before stopping near Ava's row. "Miss Mitchell?" he asked, voice firm but respectful. Ava stood, smoothing her blazer as she did. "Yes. My name is Officer Daniels with TSA Security. We've been asked to assist with a situation regarding your passport. Could you step off the plane with us?" Ava nodded, but didn't move just yet. Instead, she turned to Lauren, meeting her gaze with quiet finality. "I suggest you come too," Ava said, her voice steady, "since you seem to know so much about what happened." Lauren flinched, but before she could respond, another figure stepped onto the plane. David Mitchell. His presence shifted the entire atmosphere. Unlike the TSA officers, David wasn't in a uniform, but the weight of his authority was undeniable. His tailored navy suit fit perfectly, his expression unreadable but sharp. He locked eyes with Ava first, a silent confirmation passing between them. Then he turned to Lauren. Ava saw the exact moment Lauren realized who he was. Her breath hitched, her shoulders squared defensively. David's voice was measured, but the power behind it was unmistakable. "I need to know exactly what happened here." Lauren glanced around the cabin as if searching for an escape, but there was none. Mark Reynolds let out a scoff from his seat. "Oh, great. Now we're making a federal case out of this?" David's gaze flickered to him for a brief moment, a look so sharp and dismissive that Mark actually closed his mouth. Lauren, still trying to regain control, lifted her chin. "There's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice just barely shaking. "Miss Mitchell's passport was found damaged, and I simply followed protocol." Ava let out a quiet laugh. "Is that what we're calling it now?" David turned to Officer Daniels. "I'd like to review any footage available from the security cameras in the boarding area." Daniels nodded. "We're already pulling it." Lauren's fingers twitched. "That won't be necessary." "It is absolutely necessary," David cut in, his voice sharp enough to slice through the air. "Because right now, you're looking at a situation that could result in federal charges. Tampering with a passport isn't just unethical, Lauren. It's a crime." The weight of those words hit the cabin like a dropped suitcase. Lauren visibly swallowed, but before she could stammer out a response, another voice joined in. "I think she should be detained until this is sorted out." Olivia Carter had risen from her seat, her lawyer instincts in full force. She destroyed evidence, falsely accused a passenger, and tried to manipulate the situation to avoid accountability. That's obstruction, at the very least. Ethan, who had been hovering near the back of the cabin, took a slow step forward. His face was pale, his fingers twitching at his sides. I should say something," he blurted out. Lauren turned to him sharply. "Ethan, don't—" "I saw her take it," Ethan said, his voice cracking slightly. "I saw her take Ava's passport from her bag, and I should have said something sooner." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Ava's chest tightened, not out of shock, but from validation. She already knew Lauren was guilty, but now she had a witness willing to speak up. Lauren's face drained of all color. Mark let out a low chuckle. "Damn. Hate to see it." David's expression didn't change, but Ava knew her husband well enough to see the steel behind his gaze. "Officer Daniels," David said, his voice smooth but firm. You should escort her off the plane now. Daniels nodded. Lauren Carter, you'll need to come with us. Lauren opened her mouth, perhaps to argue, perhaps to plead, but nothing came out. She was frozen in place, her entire career slipping through her fingers. As the officers moved to take her into custody, the reality of the moment seemed to crash over her. She finally snapped. "This is ridiculous," she hissed. "You're all overreacting. This is just another case of people playing the victim and making something out of nothing." Ava tilted her head slightly. "You sure about that? Because right now I see a whole lot of people who saw exactly what you did." Lauren's breath came in short, rapid bursts, but there was no escape. As the officers led her toward the jet bridge, the cabin remained eerily silent. The weight of what had just happened settled over everyone. Ava turned to Ethan. "You did the right thing." Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. I should have done it sooner." Olivia let out a satisfied sigh and adjusted her blazer. Well, that was satisfying. Ava let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She turned back to David, her husband's steady presence grounding her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer now. Ava nodded. "I will be." David reached out, squeezing her hand briefly before turning back to Officer Daniels. "What happens next?" Daniels adjusted his radio. "She'll be held for questioning, and given the evidence we have, including witness testimony, I expect the airline will be issuing an immediate statement." Ava exhaled slowly. "Good." The flight crew finally resumed their normal post-landing procedures. Passengers, now free to disembark, began filing off the plane, casting wide-eyed glances at Ava as they passed. Some looked impressed. Others just seemed stunned by what they had witnessed. Mark Reynolds, ever the smug observer, grabbed his carry-on and shot Ava one last glance. "Well, that was entertaining," he mused. "Safe travels, Miss Mitchell." Ava met his gaze, unshaken. "You too, Mark. And try not to be so predictable next time." His smirk faltered for the first time. He turned and exited the plane without another word. Ava finally stood, smoothing out her jacket, and took a deep breath. She had walked onto this flight expecting nothing more than a routine trip. Instead, she had uncovered something much uglier, a person who thought they could strip her of her dignity and walk away unscathed. But Lauren had been wrong. She had underestimated the wrong woman, and now she was paying the price. The moment Ava stepped off the plane, the weight of what had just happened truly hit her. The air in the jet bridge felt heavy, thick with tension, but she walked forward with her head held high. Ahead of her, Lauren was being escorted down the terminal by Officer Daniels and two other TSA agents. Her stiff posture and tight jaw betrayed the panic she was trying to hide. David was waiting just beyond security, his stance solid, his eyes locked onto her the second she emerged. The moment their eyes met, some of the tension in Ava's shoulders eased. He had always been her steady force, the person who reminded her that she didn't have to carry everything alone. Reporters had already gathered near the arrivals area, their cameras flashing, their murmurs growing louder as Ava stepped into view. She ignored them for now, focused on the man walking toward her. David didn't say a word at first. He simply reached for her hand, squeezing it firmly. The warmth of his touch anchored her. "Are you okay?" His voice was quiet, meant only for her. Ava nodded. "I will be." Behind them, murmurs rose as passengers from the flight started filing out. Some moved quickly, eager to escape the chaos, but others lingered, whispering, glancing toward Ava as they passed. A few even nodded in quiet support. Mark Reynolds strutted through the terminal with that same smug energy, dragging his expensive carry-on behind him. He looked at Ava, smirked, and kept walking, as if the events on the plane had been nothing more than a mid-flight distraction. Ava didn't waste her breath on him. Instead, she turned her focus to the real issue at hand, Lauren Carter. The disgraced flight attendant was standing just beyond security, arms crossed, eyes darting between the officers and the growing crowd. She was still trying to maintain control, but Ava saw it now, the cracks in her confidence, the realization that she was no longer in charge of the narrative. Then a voice cut through the air. "Miss Mitchell." A man in a dark suit approached, flanked by two other officials. His badge was clipped neatly to his lapel, the letters TSA shining under the fluorescent airport lights. "I'm Thomas Whitaker, head of security for JFK," he said. "I've been briefed on the situation." Ava met his gaze evenly. "Then you know my passport didn't just go missing. It was stolen and destroyed." Whitaker nodded. "We're already pulling footage from the security cameras at LAX and here at JFK to confirm the timeline." His expression hardened as he glanced toward Lauren. "But given the witness testimonies and the confession from a flight crew member, we have enough to proceed with an official investigation." Lauren stiffened. "This is outrageous," she hissed. "You can't seriously believe I had anything to do with this." Ava folded her arms. "You're still trying to play innocent?" Lauren turned sharply to the officers. "You don't have proof of anything. This is just a misunderstanding." Officer Daniels exhaled sharply. "Enough, Miss Carter." He gestured toward Whitaker. "She's officially being detained for questioning." A gasp rippled through the crowd as the officers moved forward. Lauren recoiled. "Wait, you can't do this. I was just doing my job." David, who had remained silent until now, finally stepped in. His voice was steady, but the authority in it silenced the entire terminal. "Your job does not include violating federal law," he said. "You tampered with a government-issued document. That alone is a serious offense. And given the circumstances, this investigation will determine whether additional charges apply." Lauren's breath came in short, frantic bursts. She looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to back her up. But there was no one. Ethan had exited the plane and was standing near the gate, watching with conflicted eyes. He had spoken up, but that didn't make him guilt-free. He knew that. Olivia stepped beside Ava, her expression cool, calculating. "If you're smart, Lauren, you'll cooperate," she said. "Lying at this point will only make it worse." Lauren swallowed hard. The officers moved in. One reached for her arm, but before they could place her in cuffs, she let out a strangled breath and finally spoke. "Fine," she muttered. "I want a lawyer." Ava tilted her head slightly. "Now you want legal protection, after trying to strip me of mine?" Lauren's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't respond. The officers led her away, her shoulders hunched, her once pristine uniform now wrinkled from stress. The moment she disappeared through the security doors, an eerie silence settled over the terminal. Then the reporters swarmed. "Miss Mitchell, can you comment on what happened? Was this racially motivated? What do you plan to do next?" Ava held up a hand. "No comments at this time." David placed a protective hand on the small of her back, guiding her away from the chaos. Olivia followed closely behind, looking like she was already preparing for a legal battle in her head. When they were finally out of the reporter's reach, Ava let out a slow breath. David turned to her. "You sure you're okay?" Ava nodded, but then, for the first time since this nightmare began, she allowed herself to be honest. "No," she admitted. "I'm exhausted." David didn't hesitate. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her into his side. "Let's go home." Ava leaned into him just for a moment, grounding herself in the warmth of his presence. Then she pulled back, her resolve returning. "No," she said. "Not yet." David frowned. "What do you mean?" Ava looked up at him, her eyes sharp with determination. "I'm not done." Ava sat in a sleek conference room inside JFK Airport's administrative offices, her hands resting on the polished mahogany table. Across from her sat two senior executives from the airline, their crisp suits doing little to hide their discomfort. The atmosphere was thick with tension, the kind that came when people knew they were about to face consequences they never expected. David stood beside her, arms crossed, his presence alone radiating authority. Olivia sat to her right, tapping a pen against her notepad, the sharp sound breaking the silence. The head of security, Thomas Whitaker, cleared his throat. "Miss Mitchell, first of all, we want to apologize for everything that happened on your flight. This was completely unacceptable, and I assure you that the matter is being handled." Ava tilted her head slightly. "Handled how?" One of the executives, a man with graying hair and nervous eyes, adjusted his tie. "Lauren Carter has been placed on immediate suspension, pending an internal review. Given the circumstances, we anticipate termination." Ava let out a slow breath, but her expression didn't soften. "And what about accountability beyond your internal review? A flight attendant doesn't just steal and destroy a passenger's passport without thinking they can get away with it. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate." The other executive, a woman with sharp features and a rehearsed calmness, leaned forward. "We understand your frustration." Ava cut her off. "No, I don't think you do." The room went silent. Ava straightened in her seat. "I am not the first black woman to be humiliated on a plane. I'm not the first to be treated as if I don't belong in first class. And I know for a fact I'm not the first to have my rights violated mid-flight by someone who thinks they're untouchable." The executives exchanged a glance, their discomfort deepening. David spoke then, his voice low and steady. "Miss Carter thought she could erase my wife's identity with a single act. She thought she could strip away her dignity, her power, and that no one would care." He glanced toward Whitaker. "And if Ava hadn't had witnesses and the right connections, would she have been believed? Would she have been dismissed as just another angry passenger causing a scene?" Whitaker hesitated, then exhaled. "I can't speak for what might have happened in a different scenario, but I can tell you that we're not letting this go unchecked." Ava leaned back slightly. "Then I need more than apologies. I need action." The female executive folded her hands. "What exactly are you asking for?" Olivia, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke up. "For starters, full transparency on the investigation. We want access to the findings, including all previous complaints against Lauren Carter. If this wasn't her first offense, the public deserves to know." The executives visibly tensed. Ava narrowed her eyes. "There were complaints, weren't there?" The graying-haired executive cleared his throat. "There have been minor concerns raised in the past." Ava scoffed. "Minor? Define minor." He hesitated before reluctantly answering. "A few passengers accused her of discriminatory behavior, but nothing was ever formally proven." David let out a humorless chuckle. "You mean you ignored it?" The female executive's lips pressed together. "We take all complaints seriously." Ava raised a brow. "Do you?" Silence. Ava exhaled sharply. "Let me tell you what's going to happen next. 1. I want a formal public statement from the airline acknowledging what happened. Not some vague corporate apology, but the truth. 2. I want to see real policy changes, implicit bias training for staff, a system that ensures passenger complaints are taken seriously instead of swept under the rug. And 3, I want to be assured that this will never happen to another passenger again." The executives shifted uncomfortably. The female executive adjusted her blazer. "That is a lot to implement." Ava didn't blink. "Then you better get started." The room was thick with silence. Finally, Whitaker nodded. "I'll see to it that all security footage from the flight is fully reviewed. and I'll personally oversee the report being forwarded to the necessary authorities." The executives didn't look pleased, but they had no choice. Ava stood, smoothing out her jacket. "I assume you'll be in touch with updates?" The graying-haired executive cleared his throat. "Of course." Ava gave them a curt nod. "Good." Without another word, she turned and walked out of the room. David and Olivia followed, and as they stepped into the hallway, David let out a breath. "You handled that perfectly." Ava smirked. "You think that was the hard part?" Olivia chuckled. "Number. The real fun starts when the press gets a hold of this." Ava nodded. "Good, because I intend to make sure they do." Ava stood in front of the podium, her heartbeat steady as she faced the sea of flashing cameras and reporters eagerly waiting for her statement. The press conference had been called just 24 hours after the incident, but the story had already taken on a life of its own. News outlets were running the footage from the flight, clips of Lauren being led away in handcuffs circulating online, and hashtags like #Justice for Ava and #Stop Flight Discrimination had flooded social media. The airline had scrambled to contain the damage, releasing a brief, vague statement about an internal personnel matter that satisfied no one. But Ava wasn't about to let them control the story. She was here to tell the truth. David stood a few feet behind her, his stance solid, his presence a quiet reassurance. Olivia was there too, arms crossed, ready to step in if the media tried twisting the facts. And to Ava's surprise, Ethan had shown up, standing off to the side, looking as nervous as he had on the plane. She took a deep breath, then spoke. "Yesterday, I boarded a flight from Los Angeles to New York, expecting nothing more than a routine trip. What I got instead was a deliberate attempt to humiliate and dehumanize me." The room went silent. "My passport was stolen and destroyed by someone who was supposed to be responsible for my safety. I was gaslighted, dismissed, and made to feel as though I had no right to stand up for myself. And the worst part, this isn't new. This isn't shocking. This is just another example of what too many people experience every day." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "The question we have to ask is, how many times has this happened before? How many other passengers have been mistreated, ignored, or silenced because they didn't have the platform to fight back? Because they weren't believed?" A reporter raised a hand. "Miss Mitchell, do you believe this was a case of racial discrimination?" Ava met his gaze directly. "Do you?" The reporter faltered, shifting in his seat. "I don't have to tell you what this was," Ava continued. "The facts speak for themselves. Lauren Carter had a history of complaints against her, yet nothing was done. Why? Because the airline didn't want to deal with it, because people like her are allowed to operate unchecked until they finally target the wrong person." The cameras clicked rapidly, journalists scribbling furiously in their notebooks. The good news is that this time she was held accountable. This time she was fired. But that's not enough. Firing one person doesn't fix the system that allowed her to thrive in the first place. Another reporter chimed in. "What actions do you want the airline to take moving forward?" Ava exhaled slowly, then laid out her demands. "First, I want an independent review of all past passenger complaints related to discrimination and mistreatment. Every ignored report, every dismissed concern. I want transparency." The crowd murmured again. "Second, I want policy changes. Real ones. Implicit bias training is not a solution if it's just a box to check. Airlines need enforceable consequences for discrimination. There need to be protections in place so that no passenger ever has to wonder if they'll be believed when they speak up." David's expression was unreadable, but she could see the pride in his eyes. And finally, Ava continued, I want passengers to know their rights, because too often people let things slide because they think speaking up won't change anything. I want that to end today. Silence stretched in the room for a long beat before another reporter asked, What's next for you, Miss Mitchell? Ava smiled, but there was steel behind it. I'm not going anywhere. The press conference ended, but the fight was just beginning. By the next morning, the airline had no choice but to respond. Under immense public pressure, they announced a formal review of their internal policies, including the retraining of all flight attendants and a third-party investigation into past complaints. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. As for Lauren, she was facing potential federal charges for passport tampering and destruction of property. The same arrogance that had led her to believe she could get away with it had also been her downfall. Ava's case became a national conversation, sparking debates about discrimination in air travel and the treatment of black women in professional spaces. She was invited onto talk shows, interviewed for major publications, and even approached by organizations advocating for passenger rights. But none of it mattered more than the message she had fought to make clear. No one had the right to strip someone of their dignity, and if they tried, they would be held accountable. A week later, as she prepared to board another flight, this time with David by her side, Ava felt a familiar tension creep into her shoulders. But when she approached the gate, the airline employees were noticeably careful, their smiles a little too wide, their greetings overly polite. She could see it in their eyes. They knew exactly who she was. As she walked down the jet bridge, she caught a glimpse of Ethan working the cabin. He met her gaze, gave a small nod, and continued his duties. David leaned over. How does it feel? Ava smirked. Like they finally understand who they're dealing with. She took her seat, buckled in, and let out a breath. This time she was flying on her own terms. If you believe in standing up for what's right, in holding people accountable, and in never letting discrimination go unchecked, then share this story. Let's make sure no one ever gets away with this again.